We have to talk about money. Why this crisis, this economic collapse that we are witnessing, is not a failure of the current capitalist system, but it has always been its initial plan and goal. You see, back in the days, the states had the capacity to create money in order to then distribute it amongst their populations. That was the basis of any kingdom or region before capitalism took over. Nowadays, though, the states have completely given up their right to print and create money by themselves. And every year when the states want to decide their budget for the year, they are actually borrowing that money from banks. Before capitalism was corrupted, every year there was naturally more and more people on the planet. So there was more and more richnesses in the form of coins or gold that were created. But nowadays, whether it's the US Federal Reserve or the Banque de France or all these official sounding companies are actually private entities. They are controlled and in the hands of very, very wealthy and very few families, whose names I don't even have to name because we all know about the Red Shields and about the Black Rocks and whatever. The problem is that these banks do not actually create money in the form of real value, but they are printing out imaginary assets that they are creating out of nothing. When the states are going towards these banks in order to get their budget for the year, those banks are creating it out of thin air. And then they are giving it out against interest to the states. Which actually means that all of our states, whether in Europe or the US or wherever, are completely indebted towards private banks. How can a state be in debt of a private bank, you ask? Well, it doesn't make any sense. It is not logical, because basically the banks are creating ever more and more money, which then they are giving out, and it has ever less value, because we all know basic economical rule that the more there is of something, the less value it has, and vice versa. So basically, they are pouring out money and asking from the states to pay them back. How are the states going to pay them back? Well, they are pressuring their own peoples, their own population, to work for them like slaves, pay obligatory taxes, pay health insurance, pay this here and that, hold up this illusion that we need to earn our living, that we need to be paying off some kind of debt. This is the most perverted and Machiavellic lie and system that we are being fed. That we, in order to live in a place, on a land, in a state, we need to pay for that. We have not come far from the Middle Ages where slaves didn't own their land, they were not able to grow their own food on their land, they were paying enormous amounts to the landlords. Surprise, we are still calling them landlords today if we are paying enormous amounts of our money to be able to live in a place that we don't own and that we don't have full ownership and freedom over. We don't have freedom over our own lives anymore. Those slave masters, the puppet masters, are deciding over our life, our energy, our free time, and what we are doing. The majority of people in the modern world seems to have accepted that we should live and work like slaves. We don't own our own homes, we don't own the land that we are living on, we cannot really decide over our free time, over our energy, over what we are doing with our life, basically. We still pay taxes and insurances and rent to our landlords and people in power, when actually all of this is the biggest lie and hold up and illusion that was ever created. What if I told you that we need to pay off debts that don't actually exist because they were created in the first place by private banks. Hear me out here, because no one that can count from 1 to 3 can understand how this makes any sense. And I'm not a mathematical genius, I'm not an economic expert, but I'm thinking for myself. And what I'm observing does not make any sense, except for the reason that all of this was created to collapse. And we are gonna pay the price for it. So most of us are running all their lives behind big richnesses and behind money. We need to earn our lives because we are living in debt, and religion has imposed this idea on us that we came here in sin and we have to work hard in order to pay it off. And this mind virus and this trap of needing to run in a hamster wheel all our life is what is holding humanity back from realizing their true potential. Because we are being forced to live like slaves, and we are agreeing to it out of the illusion that we have no other choice. But we do have another choice, and that is to create real alternatives, to create real value, to realize that money is nothing but an illusionary soap bubble that we are consenting to. We are giving it power and value simply by running after it. Once we realize this lie and these manipulations, once we step out of this illusion that we need to run behind something that is imposed to us, once we realize that the only real value in this life is our life force energy, our time, our creativity, and nothing on the outside. Once we have realized this, then we can start finding and making our way out, which is to create real value, which is to give worth to ourselves, to our ideas, to our dreams, to our visions, to share knowledge, to trade assets, to collaborate and co-create, and not to succumb to outside pressure and feel like we need to earn something and pay something off and live and suffer like slaves, completely living in fear and scarcity and lack and feeling like we only need to survive, when actually this life was offered to us to thrive and to grow. And the biggest realization is that the power is in our hands, that we can stop believing these lies, that we can stop participating and giving our consent, giving our power away, stop legitimizing this extraction and this broken cycle of excess and overconsumption and domination and extraction, and creating a system where the basic needs of everyone are secured, where we can realize the truth that there is more than enough for everyone, when we can step into our ideals and really follow our dreams and create healthy alternatives. This moment now is not about watching the old world burn and just complain about the collapse. It is about taking back our power, remove our consent, create our own rules, live on our own terms, play our own game, realize that the power was always inside us, and that when this system is so corrupted and so based on lies and extraction, on complete illusions, scarcity is an illusion, debt is a lie, it's an illusionary concept. So when we realize that all of this was pushed so that this pyramid where 50% of world's richnesses in fake money is held by 1% of the world population, which means that 99% need to just survive with the other half. Like, in which world does that make any sense? And once we realize that this is not stable and it will fall and it will crumble, then that gives us a different perspective, where it is on us to create an alternative already while all of this is falling and crumbling. And this is exactly the moment that we are coming to now. So I want us to not watch the collapse in despair, but to realize that it was mapped out like this, and that we don't have to be passive bystanders, but we have to rise to our potential and realize and recognize our possibilities. So I would love to open a dialogue, a conversation around this. How do we find back to real value, to neutrality, to innocence? What is our dreams about a fair and just and balanced system? How do we find a way of how to share and connect instead of constantly fighting and competing and dominating each other? How can we find a way to utilize assets instead of being used by them? How can we become sovereign actors in this world instead of just passive bystanders? Those are the questions that I'm passionate about, and I would love to hear from you.